Good afternoon. My name is Rogéria de Ipanema. I'm professor at Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro, and I'm so glad to be presenting in the Coloquio Internacional de Historia del Arte, UNAM, Black Epistemographies and Rewriting of History. Black Brazilian visual artist Rosana Paulino, while questioning the image produced in Western powers and knowledge, combines her decolonized visual discourse put forth under different artistic devices, constituting a powerful symbolic epistemography of the senses of historical truths, realities between Africa and Americas, captivated by Europe. Her works repeal patriarchal structures through the feminist view of the Black woman, a framework of the artivism of the image that she cuts and reallocates in pieces in the centrality of the brutal and enslaved economical world product, sustained by the female and male Black bodies of Africa in the modern era of European Renaissance, Enlightenment, and Scientism. The aesthetic transgression of the artist's questions, the political programmatic historicity of degenerative colonialities maintained in Americas, which must be re-exposed through another prism of understanding in order to be overcome, because according to Quijano, coloniality is more enduring than colonialism itself. When Rosana creates new realities and gives them a platform to be seen in the remaking of historically dated and culturally accepted images under racial inferiority, not only does she discuss the political time from the past, but the structures of destructive colonial past in the present history of Brazil, the country with the largest Black population outside of Africa and the largest in the Americas. Rosana Paulino, with her national and international work, is an artist, educator, and researcher focused on the ethnic, cultural, and social issues of Black women and Blackness in Brazil. She held the crucial exhibition, The Sewing of Memory, which covered the author's 25-year career, held at the Pinacoteca de São Paulo and at Museu de Arte do Rio, which is a landmark in the history of visual arts and exhibitions in the 21st century of Brazil. The artist's production is composed of different processes, poetic language, and fields of knowledge. We would like to highlight specifically the strength of the image and the dimension of the print as the foundation of her expression. During an interview, the artist said, "I am more into prints, really, making, remaking, making and remaking them several times. And there is just this thing with prints and layers." From that universe, we apprehended an art traversed by repetition and seriality as a pedagogy that is material and sensitive to the eye, by multiplicity and collectivity as of Black bodies in resistance, cuts outs, overlaps, and intersectionality as decolonization of image, depth, surface, and border as emergent, urgent, permanent, and the anachronisms and horizontality of time as an ancestral, social, psychocultural time. Her epistemography, her epistemographic revisions problematize matrices and contents established in the power of colonial hierarchies. Paulino disobey the Western vile and enduring epistemes that have structured the geopolitics of knowledge, according to Mignolo. The author states that the colonial option is epistemic, which means it's not bound to the genuine fundaments of Western concepts and the accumulation of knowledge. The questions raised in natural history present themselves in a kind of atlas for dismantling images that are credited to concepts and preconcepts of ink and blood. The artist's book is printed both in black and white and color, with 12 pages of paper and cloth, some double fold, others triple fold. In it, Rosana Paulino crosses images that have determined the Eurocentric world view, having the perception of a world of others that, by having their overall view colonized, have legitimized the violent way of understanding Black bodies in particular. In that perspective, the artist refutes the false science behind the colonial project by facing the true question of natural history. Therefore, natural for what? Natural for whom? Questions exposed in the assembly of a new contemporary visual art atlas of historical revision. Thus, it is in that minefield underlined by superior self-referenced ideologies that the printer disarmed the inhuman absurdity naturalized by slavery, subverting the dominant discourse. Paulino decolonizes the historicity of image, centralizing the Black women's place with the completely black, matted, cut-out silhouette, rendered mute and invisible. On the world map to the right, next to the visual intertext to the left, of the spreading of their bodies, subtracted of visions and subjectivations of the world. The flat silhouette over the cartography plan is the representation of a half-body cut out of a Black woman's photograph with her bare breasts and unable to see. Reference of the photograph taken in Rio de Janeiro in the second half of the 19th century by a German photographer established in Brazil. When raising the second element of the page and the third of the composition, above all in an extremely symbolic space, the engraving of the red fetus appears inside the separate womb, isolated outside. It is a suppressed representation of women, of wombs that are not their own, which Rosana has cut by signifying the colonial extraction of human being from Africa. There is enslaved black existence, tortured, raped, taken to forced labor, to the death for the wealth of the West. On this page, which we are referring to as Atlas, Rosanna discusses in depth the issues of Black women and their bodies to half bodies with their arms cut off, where every scene is a fragment, combined with the colonialism of the foreigner gaze upon them on the map of the political and economical world of slavery in Africa over centuries. On that path, the agendas of race, gender, and class are complexified by Lélia Gonzalez, the Brazilian thinker pondered back in the 1980s how one could explain the racism should stay out of the discussions of feminism when she starts that both sexism and racism use biological differences to establish themselves as ideologies of domination. And we understand that Rosanna Paulino's visual discourse incorporates, emphasize on that verb, the intersectionality dimensions of Gonzalez's Afro-American feminism. On the print, agents, the peoples, we see the domination over entire population and culture, devoid of faces and identities in Paulino's intervention. The author problematizes the violence of the subordination of the other people's bodies, illustrated once again through the image of the Black woman in the center, between the two clippings of an Amerindian image, one in upward position, the other upside down, producing a set of incompletely and out of place references. Those images are overlapping with the other visual narrative in the background, which means she's giving them greater importance. The meaning of diverse lives conflagrated in their existence. They survive in the background of the Portuguese blue and white tile that surrounds the material productions of a Portugal that is enamelled in the richness of the vessels of intercontinental waters. Reference to the invasions of America, the woke and massacre of the original peoples, the mercantile traffic, and the brutal enslavement of African men and women from Atlantic and Pacific civilization to Brazil. It should be noted that the cut-out reference of a Black woman comes from another 18th century photograph by the foreigner Augusto Stahl, produced in Rio de Janeiro and published in an album in 1865. Stahl accompanied a scientific mission in the Brazilian territory, coordinated precisely by the Swiss biologist Louis Agassiz, professor at the Museum of Comparative Zoology from the Harvard Institute, and an advocate of scientific racism. Such period of production of contexts distorted by political economic interests and systematized in certain science was sustained the biological condition of inferiority of the Black population by the program of race hierarchies at the service of capital. In the discussions of late Eurocentrism, Achille Mbembe articulates this centrality with the legitimization of race and political and legal racialization for Black people, says, in the Atlantic Triangle, such productions of reality according to the principle of partition, differentiation, separation, and hierarchy has been at large since the 17th century. Moreover, along the axis that connects Europe to Africa, Africa to Americas, Africa to the Americas, and the Americas to Europe, culminates with the productions of black codes. Through these black codes, the race and ghostly category, henceforth hypostatized, finds refuge in a number of legal systems. All of it was extended up to the present time, and at the beginning of the third decade of the 21st century, it still owes much to be profound reparation of the Black population and inclusive policies in Brazil. And in the last 2 weeks of August 2021, and at the very heart of power in Brasilia, more than 6,000 indigenous people camped as a part of a various protests contrary to the creation of new bases for the outline of indigenous lands. We support at the indigenous people in this cause. The image proposes a context of bone that centralizes and divides the composition, plus the black body of a naked man showing his back profile and front, shadows in the background, two instruments, one of punishment and the other of anthropometry. On the left, the muzzle from official slavery times, assuming the dimensions of the man in front of it, where there is a shadow in the interdiction of black voices and the manufacturing of scientific concepts that normalizing their silencing. Thus, in the space of the right, the skull caliper works while amplified in a racist ideology designed to reduce blackness, in disempowerment and shame, first through the size of their bodies, proportionally smaller than the natural one. And it is exactly this burden that lies in the political discussions of natural history and in the diffusion of the visual of that visual culture. Finally, from a Black epistemography standpoint, with threads and needles, cutting and sewing, glue and suture, in natural history, with prints that claim space beyond the edge, Rosana Paulino resizes the aesthetics of image of oppression in disobeying the vile and long-lasting epistemes of the social, political, economic, and cultural inequalities imposed on the Black population. The artist, he writes history and exposes the process of racism in Brazil, in the Americas, in the world. Thank you. Thank you, Rosana Paulino.